The yellow thing this time they took out and made it fresh, you know?
When I
I actually brought it, I was doing it in takeaway.
As soon as you know what pages we're on, would you let me know, because I'm always stumbling around here.
We're gonna be on section 5. You're not.
We have to talk about what that means, but that's what the document says, right? You were ready to retire before she.
Well, that's what's holding up some of that structure.
I think they're gonna have to come up with a strategy to work around it.
We have to.
I was surprised, I was told that it's working out. I'll share all the It's not a budget issue, but it's lots of budget.
It ties up two positions in the general department. It ties up mine, and then we have someone who's acting that, you know, isn't gonna be able to get some of that.
So are you coming down and
All I know.
back and forth? Possibly taking that long to just kind of, after the end of the day, to kind of decompress.
Yeah, I gotta
Paying
go
both
change
sides.
water,
And-
first check on kids.
So money out of her pocket, she gets no benefits, so, you know, and what she gets, she pays for herself.
I'm gonna change water today, so,
With all that rain over the weekend, you still have to
they
watch?
didn't get any up there, that was
We got some Sunday,
Yeah.
and then we had some Monday or Tuesday or something. We had a pretty good rain then. Then we had some Sunday, we didn't get anything.
I'll tell you what, even an inch these days doesn't do it for very long. I mean, we're just
No.
we're so dry out there. We got an inch and a tenth, I think.
Like Saturday,
That's right, oh, it will be dusty. Horse Lake Road's always dusty today.
Bob's sitting having his truck out there, I don't know what he's doing.
We can get started here before he gets in if you want to. Maybe you can get some of his money or something.
Does he have money?
Bob, you never knew.
You'll just tell him when he comes back in, everything's balanced, everything's soft.
That's right, that's right.
We bounced it.
We got that, we got the 4 to 1
And we named the pool, yeah, he's upset because he doesn't have a blue shirt. We named the pool.
we're at home with change.
And tell him he's handling animal control this year.
Ooh,
Big bill.
It's part of our budget savings plan. We're gonna rotate the animal control officer between the board members, he gets the first 5 years.
He can take care of some of the issues on the Madeline Plain.
I bet he would.
I know it's a day, there he is. Took his tie off too.
he was having a secret meeting with Red.
Okay. Bob, we waited for you. Thank you. I know you didn't want to miss a minute of this.
I don't, I'm glad you
I gotta wait. Okay, board will come back into session, and we're gonna be taking up probation, juvenile hall. Did you enjoy this morning, by the way? You had, what, a good hour there, so.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Anyway, thank you very much for coming today.
Got the word out.
Definitely a learning experience. Mr. Chairman, Board of Supervisors, I'm Jen, Probation Department, currently the acting chief probation officer. I put together a narrative that I'd like to give to you guys regarding some of our
Thank
budgets.
you. Tab 5, Julie, right?
Tab 5, yes.
Tab 5.
For the board's information, well, Jennifer is our acting, has been since last fall, I guess. I just got a letter this morning from a doctor putting Ms. Martin out on administrative leave or medical leave for another year.
For another year?
Year.
Paid?
Oh, no.
How do you do that?
You get a doctor to send a note in and have the presiding judge that won't make any change.
And they don't get paid?
Is that reasonable?
Well,
It does.
Use of all leave, not getting paid.
I believe in anyone's book.
Well, I know it
Okay, yeah.
definitely hurts our department a little bit as far as the structure and the positions within our department. So that'll be something I'll speak more about in the near future. So what I've done is put together a narrative quite similar to the one that the sheriff used. And since he had left off with 138, we can go ahead and start with 138, which is 0551, which is the local community corrections partnership fund. So as he already told you guys, it's for the Public Safety Realignment Act. And what we're asking for to increase in that budget is for another half-time probation officer out of that budget. The reason why we're asking for another half-time probation officer is because we already have one full-time. We currently have one half-time and one three-quarter-time probation assistant. The way that we've been looking at managing all of the populations within probation is to look at managing them by risk. And when you look at that, the PRCS, that's a high-risk caseload. And when you have a high-risk caseload, it's definitely nice to have ideal numbers of 25 to 30 people on that caseload per probation officer to effectively supervise and manage that population. So we've got 38 total on the PRCS caseload right now. So in looking at that, we would be able to split some of those lower level offenders that have been checking in, they've been working their program, they're doing everything that they can so that we can move them down to a medium risk caseload. That's where one of those half-time probation officers would come in. And then the ones that are, getting close to the end to where they're meeting all of their requirements, and the only thing that they're doing is just checking in maybe every other week, we can move those to a low-risk caseload. That would be the other half-time probation officer. So that was where some of our main parts came from. That budget was for there. And then there was already the explanation for some of the other areas of that budget. If you would like, I can kind of rehash that if you want.
Well, it was part of what Dean and John were just looking at. They've already given us a total breakdown on that, so.
My
Yes,
question
they
might be,
did.
and I don't know if it's for you or for Julie or Marty, Jen, and might even be for Yvonne or somebody. This AB 109, the funding behind AB 109 and so on, I'm not sure I understand exactly how much is controlled by legislative action and or the state, and how much flexibility do we have in the way it's allocated? We being not necessarily the board, but I mean the county.
As I understand, the state does not specify how you allocate the AB 109 money.
It's our local.
But
That's what the CCP does.
What the
Right,
state, what
I
the
mean,
state,
so how much,
what the state law says is you have to form this community corrections partnership, and they have to come up with a plan. You can only overturn that plan
You
by
can't rewrite it, yeah.
I think by a 4/5 vote.
Right.
Now, what's interesting is in several
we've seen
counties,
it develop for a while, I know.
Well, it's been developed since October of 11, that's
Right.
when this thing
And
started.
initially, the CCP did include the chairman of the board, but then in subsequent revisions, they kept the board having an active role with the CCP.
Now, some counties across California, probably about a half a dozen, maybe about right, have made the decision that legislation only applied to the first year. And that in subsequent years, they have absolute control over the money. Nobody's challenged them on
And it comes back
And I
to some of
think
your
that-
questions as to how deep do we have to dig down into the prioritization of
Well,
these funds and so
and
on.
I think that's a relevant discussion to have, and I have read where they pertain to that first year, but subsequent years, it hasn't been necessarily challenged. I mean, I don't think it would behoove the board to, pick a fight with the sheriff and.
No, I'm not,
And the CCP.
I'm not questioning the allocation that's being
membership,
made.
Yeah, well, I think it's important for us to tune in to what it is that they are actually doing. And Dean, I think, and John gave a pretty strong presentation as to what each of those allocations and how the $278,542 is brought in for the jail services, supplies, and, 35% of that particular budget and the money they put in for the jail hospital. And I think probably both of those allocations were made out of that in light of, knowing full well if they didn't, that they could find, the board being more provoked by it. But I have a question, Julie, and this goes to that line 1380551. And this is on page 14 of the revenue, which is part of that 5.3 million. It shows $1,021,985 as being the sales tax realignment for the public safety, but yet this budget is for $1,194,000 that would be tied to the same 138,551. So that's about $170,000 discrepancy, and there is a the money that the public defender, and there's another $117,000 that is part of 553 versus 551, but those two numbers don't seem to add up. And
We did have a carryover from last year.
Probably carry over, because I don't see, what my last submission was, just had the budget, a summary that had revenues available of $1,021,985, and
well, there was
that's,
292,017 that was the carryover for the entire fund, and it showed revenues. I mean, this is looking at the summary sheet on the very front, which is Fund 138, so, but that doesn't show the breakdown for this particular.
the budget that's submitted that has the benefits, the salaries, the salary and benefits, the 6.75 people, and the budget shows a fund balance for this particular budget unit of 292,000 even. So they were probably, this is probably all 0551, all of the carryover.
So all that carryover will be part of that, this particular fund? Because it, I mean, you show 5,300,000 in revenue and available funds, and this is just, I mean, you would think it was the whole amount, but it's only 1/5 of the total pot. So that, until we started really zeroing in, I didn't realize we even had that kind of money out there. But okay, so there's 292,000 carryover is, okay, well that.
And that was submitted by the CCP.
Yes.
Right. Well, as I said, I'm not questioning the allocation process or anything else, but
Jennifer, are you aware of any statutory limitations on how to spend the money?
It's very confusing, and they actually have a class on it this coming Friday that the sheriff and John are gonna go to, John Mino.
Yeah.
So that we can really, kind of nail down where does this money, all get allocated, and what is the exact law and legislation. So we'll have more answers about it come Friday after they go to this class. And
Yeah, CSAC's putting this on.
they are, and until then, it's been a legislative nightmare to dive into and to look at it and read it.
I think the problems are compounded too, because the funding is a result of Prop 30 that passed in last November, which increased the sales tax or dedicated a piece of the
Right.
sales tax. And there's really hasn't been any experience yet on what's gonna be received and the allocations formulas that they develop. So it's kind of, anyone's best
Maybe
guess.
we'll reserve our questions for a little bit later, because it is a different pot of money with a
Yeah.
different set of rules.
It is, and the growth allocation, should, they've gone around, in between 145,000 and 174,000 for the growth allocation.
Well, 170,000 was when they thought they were gonna have higher revenue. They thought the sales tax would go up more than it did, so 145 is a more realistic expectation that will actually generate.
Okay. Given the answer that Julie gave us, Mr. Chairman, on what the 292, that's, the carryover, the 292 and $17 is the entire amount of that carryover is for the CCP fund.
Right.
And, you talk about with this allocation here is 1,194,000, that's what John and the sheriff also provided. That, you've got $1,314,002 available, and you're budgeting $1,194,342, which indicates that you're leaving a carryover balance of $119,660. And so, one of my rules in terms of, and that kind of is consistent because it shows 118 projected ending balance of 118,745, so it ties in to that. But it's, we're going to go to Sacramento to make the case that we're not getting enough funding under AB 109, especially given the stuff we've heard the sheriff talk about there. But yet we have 119,000 roughly that's remaining unallocated within the system.
They do show that, I can put it up on the projector, but I'm just telling you what the last submission I got from John Reno
Yeah.
has. Current year budget, it does have the revenue and expenditures we're talking about, but it's clearly down, they've added a line that says next year's fund balance, 118,765.
Yeah,
Now, I don't know what
and
that's restricted for, but
Yeah.
they definitely are aware
Well,
and see it there.
They're,
And we
yeah,
have- we
they're
have
only
that.
planning on spending this, even though they have that. And so my question, and had we had this conversation before they left at lunchtime, is especially given, some of the other, obviously this is money that has to be spent within the program.
Right.
And if we're looking at the general fund, the sheriff's alone up there in the Fund 130, the public safety, and obviously this interacts with public safety, we're $1,700,000, like the stress there. Here's $118,000 that we're planning on carrying over in this program, and so they said 35% of the jail was to go for 35% of the services and supplies. If you increase that to 40 or 42%, and now you use up that 118,000, that's 118,000 having to be brought from somewhere else. And obviously they probably want to have some rollover money for like a contingency, but
Who would be contacted to find out what the plan is for the 119? I could send them an email.
What we've looked at is having that money in there in case the jail, hospital increases for that AB 109 population, so that there is still money there, that if they've utilized the entire allocation, they can then come back and
well, they didn't make that representation this morning at the table. They talked about everything but that. And
Well, as I said, I think this will be continued to be discussed as we move into the future.
I think you're right, if that's unprogrammed money, they rate to use it offset county costs.
Correct.
and
But I think that
Which
has to
is-
be committee approved before we can,
it
because
does have
they
to go
approve this budget.
Right.
forward to the CCP before we can do any of that. But we did have that there just in case.
so he was offering up $92,000 or $150,000 in salary savings, and as the idea that, we have to come back and backfill with excess hospital costs or whatever that might come along. He was talking about that, but at no point was this 119,000 part of that equation. And I'm just saying, is going through this here, I would, if we leave monies unallocated in the budget, and Sacramento's, they're monitoring these numbers and stuff, they're gonna say, well, if we go down there and make the case, hey, we need another $1 million for AB 109, let's just use that as an example to backfill with all these inmates. And somebody figures out we got $100,000 $1,000 plus change sitting there on the table. I go, so why are you bugging us? Why don't you use the money you're using? So in other words, when it comes to state dollars, I can understand not using our own local tax dollars and setting those aside for a rainy day, but I can tell you, when you got federal and state dollars and you don't use them, and they figure that out. That's what we did with the courthouse construction money, is we had a big chunk of money sitting there, and we were using our regular dollars to fund some activities, and even though the courthouse monies are basically one-time only type monies, we said, well, let's put our regular monies, the ongoing monies, in the reserve account, and let's use those monies up, because at some point in time, there's gonna be a bright bulb in Sacramento that's gonna come on and say, well, let's just reach, you know, what's ours is ours and what's yours is ours. And
Special
they're gonna-
districts, the same thing.
Yeah,
Obligated
so, yeah, so I think, to me, I would like to see this be fully allocated, and if we're gonna have a reserve, let's put that in one of our local dollars.
Go right ahead.
You can probably find some juvenile offenders who would use the swimming pool.
Well, half the swimming pool allocation is sitting right there.
Okay.
I think that's a good,
Go ahead,
I think that's a good plan, Mr. Nichols.
They probably use the roads too.
So then we have Fund 114, Budget Unit 5610. That's our probation truancy prevention and reduction program. We've been looking at the high school, we've been talking with them, we've been trying to work on an MOU so that we can contract with services for them. The whole dollar amount from the schools is estimated at $46,500. And we have confirmation from all of the schools that we've been participating with for their allocations and that they are buying into the program. The only one that we don't have a concrete answer on yet is the high school, because we're still trying to work out the MOU with exactly what services there's going to be, because we decided to have a separate MOU just for them. One of the things that we're looking at in that fund is to look at the JJCPA grant that we applied for. We're going to look at modifying that to increase it to help offset some of the costs of a probation officer. Some of the salaries and benefits, because there's been a greater need and more participation from us doing a lot of prevention and behavior services as well in some of the schools, so that we can divert some of these youth from actually coming into our systems.
Are you working with all the schools within the county or just certain ones?
No, the only ones that have bought in is Westwood Unified, Westwood Charter, Fort Sage, Susanville School District, and Lassen High School. We're working with them. The other counties have chosen not to opt in, or the other schools within the county have chosen not to opt in.
So this 46,500 projected is all those schools through the Lassen County Office of Ed?
Yes.
Are you working with other schools to see, I mean, have you visited with them yourself?
I have not. We sent out letters to everybody, all of the school districts, to see if they wanted to participate. And the ones that we currently have were the ones that responded. And Richmond, they took it to their board, and they chose not to participate.
So who doesn't participate?
Richmond chose not to participate. Big Valley has chose not to participate.
Schaefer?
Schaefer's chose not to participate. Janesville has chose not to participate.
Furlong?
Hurlong participates,
Furlong?
yes, and so does Long Valley Charter as well.
Not the rest of you.
Yes.
So these are the only ones that down here, these four. Susanville Elementary participates.
Susanville School District, yes.
So we have a program that costs $143,000 and we collect $46,000 in revenue.
There's the JJCPA grant that is also a revenue.
Oh, okay. You see that.
And-
98,000.
It's on page 8 of the revenue.
Yeah.
And what we are going to do is take a look at that grant and see exactly how much we'll be able to
get from that grant in order to offset some of the charges to the schools, so that the school districts will be able to have the amount that they contribute reduced and still keep the fund whole.
If that grant was to disappear, would this program then kind of collapse because of the lack of funding?
Yes, sir.
Regrettable.
Regrettably, because it is one of our biggest prevention pieces. We put a lot of time and effort into working this program
Yeah.
because we have been able to divert over half of our youth from coming into our juvenile justice system by providing some of the behavior services that we do, by intervening at that first level rather than being reactory to it.
Let alone, I mean, you hate to think of it financially, but let alone picking up ADA at the school level, I mean, obviously,
Yes.
getting back in the classroom.
We get them back in the classroom, they're educated, the schools do get to collect more ADA from it. And then at the end of the school year, we prepare all of the mandated cost logs for the school, which is where they get a portion of their money in return as well. They receive approximately $20 per first letter that we send out in the mail.
I didn't know that.
And they also get to collect the money from our time and energy with the truancy conferences. But unfortunately, with that funding, because we did look at it to see if it would be more cost effective for us to just submit those claims and receive that money. But the state is extremely far behind in allocating that money to the schools, and sometimes they'll wait anywhere from 1.5 to 3 years before they get an allocation. So we decided that would not be a good option, and one of our better options would be to actually look at increasing the grant money to see if we can help to offset some of the costs to some of the school districts that are smaller that just can't really afford it. Is there any other questions? The next fund is 145 in our budget unit 0561, which is one of the main operating budgets for the probation department. It encompasses most of the probation officers except for the ones that are in the 114 fund for the truancy program and the 138 fund for the CCP. We've been working currently with 8 full-time deputy probation officers. One is an acting chief, 2 full-time deputy probation officers from the 114 fund, 4 administrative staff positions, and 3 employees that have been out on medical leave. Those 3 employees that are out on medical leave have currently exhausted all of their leaves, so they're no longer being paid currently. So there is some savings for some salaries in there. We currently have 75 juveniles on probation and 316 adults for a total of 391. There were 200 juvenile reports that are provided to the court last year. We also had received 75 felony referrals and 109 misdemeanor referrals and 57 infraction referrals. Half of those referrals are processed informally through juvenile intake hearings, and a juvenile probation officer is authorized to act as a juvenile hearing officer, so they're basically one of the judges, which is another diversion type program to handle some of these lower level offenses and be able to give youth some community service and other sanctions that are appropriate to the level of crime that they had. There were approximately 413 adult reports provided to the courts. So most of our job, as it's kind of laid out here, is looking at how the workload that's coming in from the courts. So we have to keep up with all of our court reports and file those in a timely manner. And we also have to supervise the amount of probationers that we have. With 6 probation officers, 3 in the adult division and 3 in the juvenile division, it's really hard to effectively manage that kind of work. And it's really hard